So, in the last session we have discussed the benefits and how to use the character set and how to define an identifier and what are the different data types, and that is what we have seen. Now we will try to understand constants and types of the constant, what do you mean by a constant, and we will try to discuss one by one. Constant, again it is a value, the name itself says it, constant is a value that you cannot change during the program execution. So, whenever you write something or whenever you define something, you cannot change that value, that we call it as a constant. Constant is any value that cannot be changed during the program execution. If you take the C in programming, any number or single character or character string, we call it as a constant. If you take 5 is a constant, you cannot change it, or single character A, yes, it is a constant, or maybe a character string, that is also defined or comes under, we call it as a constant. A constant is an entity that does not change the value, whereas variable, see, try to understand the difference, variable and constant both will contains the value, but constant you cannot change the value during the execution, but variable is an entity, it may change, that is the only difference. Both are accommodating a space for the value, constant will not change, but variable may change. So, example, if you take the number 50 represents a constant integer value. Similarly, if you take programming in C is a fun, that is an example for constant character string. Now, C, I think in this particular statement, single character, if I talk about single character C, and character string, collection of characters. See here, this is an example, programming in C is a fun, that is an example for constant character string, right. Again, so when you classify these constants, it will be classified into two, primary constants, another one is secondary constants. So, look at this C constants, it will be categorized into primary and secondary. What are the primary constants? Whatever you define as an integer constant like 5, 5.2, C. So, this is a integer constant, real constant, character constants. So, these are all comes under the primary constants. When you talk about secondary constants, all your other data structures like array, pointer, structure, union, enumeration, right. So, these are all secondary constants. So, again these constants are further categorized into numeric constant and then the character constant and then the string constant. Overall, first high level classification, primary, secondary. Under primary you have integer, real, character, and secondary array, pointer, structure, union, enum, and etc. There are so many other constants. So, after again it will be further categorized into the numeric, character, and then the string constants. We will try to understand one by one. Numeric constant, as the name says, numeric, it consists of digits, it requires minimum size of 2 bytes, maximum is 4 bytes, because the range of the data type integer, short is 1, int 2, and then another one is long, it is a 4 bytes. It may be a positive or negative. If you talk about the numeric constants, it may be a positive or negative, but by default sign, if you do not specify anything, it will be assumed, or by default the sign will be a positive. No comma or space is allowed within the numeric constant. Whenever you define a numeric constant, you should not use any comma or space between the numeric constants. That should be have only must have at least one digit. The allowable range for an integer constant is, this is the range for allowable integer from a negative 3 to 32,768 to positive 32,767. Truly speaking, the range of always integer depends on the compiler. This may not be always, because always it depends on which compiler you are using. For 16-bit compiler like Turbo C or C++, the range is this. If 32-bit compiler, the range would be more, because we have whatever we have seen, that is for 62-bit. So, if it is 32-bit compiler, it will be more, it will be greater than that. So, the range of an integer constant has to do with the type of the compiler, what type of compiler you are using, based on that the range will define. So, again as already I told you, constant, integer constant and real constant. An integer constant is a whole number without decimal point. So, decimal constant is 0 to 9. Octal here we have some what is that types, decimal 0 to 9, always decimal will be having the base 10. If it is an octal, it consists of only 0 to 7, the base should be 8, and even if it is an hexadecimal, then it is 0 to 9. After 10 we need to consider as 10 instead of 10, that is A, 11 is B, C is 12, like that, that is up to 15, the base is also a 16, and then the last one 16 we consider as a F. So, that means 0 to 9 as it is up to your decimal, but once it comes to the 10, that will be treated as a A, where in hexadecimal 10 will be A, 11 will be B, 12 C, 13 D, 14 E, 15 F. So, base is 16, that is an hexadecimal. In decimal constant, first digit should not be 0, unlike an octal constant. In decimal constant, your first digit should not be 0, unlike octal constant. First digit must be 0, where in the octal, because it is a representation of 3 bits, 0 like this. See, in decimal you should not be your first, as simple as that, it should not be 0, and in octal it must be 0, and in hexadecimal constant first to 2 digit should be like this, because it will be in the 4 digit format. Decimal is 1, octal first should not be 0, second in octal it should be 0, it is a 3 bit format, 2, 4, 8, that is the only 1, 2, it is a 2, 4, 18, 8, 16, right. So, that is what the decimal constant first digit should not be 0, unlike octal constant first digit must be 0, and in hexadecimal constant first digit should be like this, 0x or any number, that is what, any number 0x, such as 0x24 or 0x187A. So, by default type of integer constant is an integer, but if the value of the integer constant exceeds range, then the value represented by the integer type is taken to be unsigned integer or a long integer when it exceeds the range. It can also, if you want, you can also explicitly mention integer and what is that, unsigned integer by specifying or by using the suffix like il or uu, either this, right, it is a integer or unsigned integer, maybe that you can explicitly specify. So, another type category is real constants, that is with the decimal places. To construct or to create that real constant, always we must follow the rule, real constant may have at least one digit, it must be decimal point, 1 digit, at least one digit, and at least it must have a decimal point. Otherwise, if you do not have a decimal point, it will be treated as a string. So, it could be either, again similar to the integer, whether it may be a positive or it may be a negative, but default, if you do not specify, our default sign is positive. No comma or blanks are allowed within the real constant. Whenever you define a real constant, as simple as in the integer what we have seen, the same way you should not use any comma or blank space between, like this 325, this is signed 3 plus 325.34, this is just 426.0, this is a negative number minus 32.76. These are some of the examples for real constants. To express a small or large real constant, exponent with respect to the scientific form is used, where the number is written always in the mantissa and exponent which was separated by this particular notation. Exponent again can be a positive or negative integer, but mantissa can be real or it may be an integer. See the example, this is what exponent form mantissa we will write, and then exponent example for that. And by default the type of floating point constant is always a double. It can also be explicitly by you can define like this by specifying f or f. Next, character constant. Character is represent always a single character, that is always enclosed within a single code. If you feel like this, this can be a special digit or a single special symbol or white space. See, whatever you define, everything is with, even though here it is a blank, but that blank, that space is also a within a single code, surrounded within a code, that it will be treated as a character constant. Every character constant has a unique integer like and value in machine's character code as if the machine code, because see that has to be understood by your machine, right. That is the reason for every character it has an ASCII value representation of that. Some numeric values always associated with each upper, because ASCII format A consists of an ASCII format as range from always 65, it starts with 65. Similarly, lowercase plus has some ASCII value, minus also has some value. For everything there is some ASCII value, that is a representation, it is an integer only. Some numeric values associated with each upper and lowercase alphabets and decimal places. See here I have given here uppercase A to Z always starts from the range 65 to 90, lowercase 97 to 120, 0 to 9, 48 to 59. These are some of the ASCII values. So always whenever I say use some string, that internal ASCII representation for that, if I say cat C has some ASCII value for that lowercase c or uppercase, A has lowercase or uppercase, T again lower or upper. So based on that C, A, T, so every character has an ASCII value, it is a representation. Internally it will take that ASCII value and it will convert. We have seen in the last slide like what is that, decimal, octal, hexadecimal, that conversion will happen and finally it will be converted into the binary format. So in the machine our computer will understand only the zeros and ones. So finally everything will be converted into a binary format, your cat also, your 90 also, 100 also, finally it will understand in that particular format. Next, string, as already we mentioned, string is a collection of character or a sequence of characters, again which is included between the double quotes. Character is a single quote, here it is a double quote, that we call it as a string. String constant has a 0 or 1 or more than one character, and at the end of the string always null character is automatic, even though you do not specify explicitly, by default end of the character will be placed by the compiler. You see some of the example, see like this, 908 is also a number, but it is surrounded by double quotes, it will be considered as a string, right. These are some of the typical example for the string constants. In C, although same characters are enclosed within single and double quotes, it represents a different meaning such as A and A. See now it is a, that means even though both are the same characters, but enclosed within a single and double quote, it represents a different meaning. First one is a string because it is surrounded by double quotes with, because see always we mentioned string always, even though you do not specify, at the end of that string your null character is defined at the end, here A null, but here it is a character. So there is no null. So obviously both are different with ASCII representation. So again another one is symbolic constant. If you want to define any symbols, so yes, for that always you need to include define at the header file. So by using the special keyword, that is #define. So that we call it as symbolic constant, is a name. Always whenever you use that character, sequence of character, the special symbol will be placed. So the symbolic constant is a name that substitutes for a sequence of characters, and characters may be a numeric character or a string constant. These constants are generally defined at the beginning of the program, that is nothing but header section. So whenever while defining #include stdio.h, so usually all our symbolic constants will be defined in that section. See some of the example, #define name value, here name generally written in always whenever you define the symbolic constants by just one rule is it is always good to practice, always you keep that in a uppercase. So, by looking at that identifier, yes, it is a symbolic constant. See, whenever I want to use 10, here I defined, so max 10. So, if I say in future in my program, if I use max, it is a representation of 10. If I use CH, it is a representation of B. If I say name, it is a representation of Sony. So, that is what I have defined, hash define max space 10, hash define space CHB, hash define name Sony. So, going forward in your program, wherever you use max, it will be understood that it is a 10. Whenever I use name, it is understood it is a Sony. So, always we need to keep in mind your symbolic constants, always we need to define by using hash define keyword, and that should be at the beginning of the program. That is what the symbolic constant is. So, this is what the the idea behind how to, what is constant, types of constants and all these things.